spring, which is nice, though. I think we're supposed to get rain today.
Yeah.
I think so. Looks like a chance, yeah. But I don't know. The rest of the week looks okay. Finally. Oh, good morning, Carmen. How we doing?
Good morning, Mr. How are you? I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, doing all right. We were
Yes.
just talking about the weather. It's a lot more like spring now.
It's
Good morning, everybody. Hello, Flavia and Gata.
Good morning, Mr. John. How are you?
Doing all right. Doing all right.
Yes, of course. Good. Thank you.
Hard to believe, guys. This is the it's not quite the last week of April, but we're getting pretty fast here towards the end of the spring. I think probably some of your kids are going to be finished in about a month.
Exactly. I got a notification from school. The last day will be on May 28th.
Yeah, so I mean, you're getting pretty close. Yeah.
Yes.
It's funny how, I told you guys February is my least favorite month. It's the shortest month, but it feels the longest. But then it's funny, once you get into March and then April, and then suddenly things just keep going faster and faster. And then when you're in May is like super fast. All these things are happening, the school, the college where I teach. The first couple of weeks of May are really busy. We've got meetings and graduation and all that stuff. So it'll be in just a few weeks, it'll feel like it's summertime, so it's kind of funny. So we're gonna talk a little bit about summer here in just a moment. So I see Lubna's here. Hey, Lubna.
Hi, Mr. John. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Yeah, so we were talking about springtime. It feels like we're moving faster now. Feels like we're getting much closer to the summer, which is good because I don't know. This winter was pretty hard. This was a pretty hard winter here in the Cincinnati area, and of course we've had lots of rain, lots of flooding. Just it's been a really hard few months here at the beginning of 2025. So it's been very hard. All right, well, guys, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll see if anyone else joins us. But again, I never know who's on spring break and who isn't. So, but anyway, let's get started. It is Monday, April 21st. Now, I was talking that summer will be here soon. The problem here is that with summer also comes other problems, right? Now, of course, we want the better weather and we want the better whatever. But if you're especially new to the area, I've got bad news for you. The cicadas are returning. I don't know if you remember, we've had the last several years, we've had cicadas, these weird looking insects that you see here on this picture. 2021 was kind of like the last really bad year of cicadas. So I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. But first, let's talk about this particular group. Now, first off, they generally have these different names for their different, years of when they begin. So for example, we're about into the next, what's called the brood. The brood is referring to kind of the different generations of cicadas. So the news here is that brood 14 is ready to emerge, which actually they're going to start emerging a little bit earlier this year. They're going to come out in May. Usually they start coming out in June. They last for a few weeks. So I think May is probably going to be when they're predicting to arrive. So this appeared in my news feed yesterday, actually, from the Lexington, Kentucky newspaper. So I thought I'd play this little video here. But this particular brood appeared in 2008. So I don't know if anybody was here in 2008. Was anyone living in the United States in 2008? Maybe not. But the idea is that every year we get a different sort of group of cicadas, and depending on which part of the United States, sometimes they come out. So this particular group will be appearing here in the Kentucky area. So you'll start to see a lot of trees. You know, cicadas love to latch onto trees and other places around your house, for example. Sometimes they can attach themselves to your house too. But the idea is they're mostly just annoying. If you've ever seen cicadas around, generally they don't live very long. They leave their shells everywhere. So I'm going to show this little video. This is from the news in Lexington. It's just going to talk about cicadas coming to the area, and then we'll talk a little bit more about previous cicadas that we've seen here in the area. So I'm going to turn on this little video here. Let's watch it. We may have a commercial too, so I'm going to let the commercial run first. But the idea is cicada. Okay, so I didn't know if you were able to catch everything in the broadcast, but as they said, it could be tens of thousands of cicadas throughout the area. So it can be bad. And so what I want to know first is how many people were here in 2021? How many people were in this area in 2021? Okay, so I think a few of you I remember. So guys, do you remember the 2021 cicadas? Do you remember those? Carmen doesn't seem so happy about it. Well, for about 2 weeks, the cicadas were everywhere, and in fact, when you were, I was driving on 275, you know, the 275 loop, and this is absolutely true. As I was driving, they were flying across the highway, and they would hurtle themselves into your cars. I mean, it was just crazy. It was like you were in a science fiction movie. And so for about 2 weeks, they can be very, very annoying. And if you saw from the newscast, they can destroy trees. You know, they lay eggs. So it depends. It depends on the temperatures. It depends on a lot of things. But the 2008 brood, which is the one they're talking about, basically come out every 17 years. That's generally the cycles. You know, some years not so much, but this big one in 2008 was a big one, and so we're going to probably see it again here in 2025. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the one from 2021. That was the most recent one where it was really bad, and so we'll talk about that. And then we'll also discuss another phrasal verb, comeback, that I think will be appropriate for this particular discussion, right? Because yeah, it seems like the cicadas are coming back to the area. And then we're going to continue with our lesson. We'll really get into detail today about separable and inseparable phrasal verbs. So as I mentioned before, different broods, you know, different groups of cicadas emerge every 17 years or so. So every 17 years, a different group of cicadas will emerge. Now, keep in mind, that doesn't mean it's always going to happen here in this area. You can see different maps of where the cicadas will come out. So, for example, the last really bad one was 2021. And then probably about 4 or 5 years before that. So generally we get to see here in this area, you know, the different cycles. Not every 17-year cycle, you know, because it fits every year, will be bad in this area. However, the 2021 invasion was really bad. It was called the Brood X, or the number 10, right? Brood X is what they were called. Now I'm going to play for you. So what I did, I don't know if Carmen, Lubna, if you guys remember, I went outside and took my phone to record the noise. Now guys, remember, I live right next to Dixie Highway. So this is the busiest, you know, the busiest highway here in Northern Kentucky. Of course, you've got 71, 75, but those are big. Dixie Highway, you know, passes through lots of neighborhoods. But what's funny is you could walk right onto the street and you could hear this. This is how bad they sounded. So this was just a recording from my phone. I've kept it since 2021. So let's listen to it. I'm going to bring it up here on the next screen. So did you hear the cars passing by? Yeah, so you noticed you could still hear the cicadas. Now, where I live on Dixie Highway, I live right here in Lakeside Park. I mean, I live, if you know, it is, well, I don't know, Flavia, if they'll be that bad, but that was just walking out my front steps. I just stepped outside and just took my phone. I didn't have to go anywhere. I didn't have to drive anywhere. Just basically walked out of my house, and that's what it sounded like. Now, it was like that for about 2 weeks. That was the worst, though. That particular day was so bad that you couldn't hear it. You'd walk outside and you couldn't talk, couldn't hear anybody, couldn't talk on the phone, couldn't do anything. So I don't know if it's going to be that bad. I hope not. But anyway, guys, if you live near any area where you have trees, there's a good chance you're going to hear them. So that's a little preview, right? For those of you. Now, do you remember that, Carmen, Lubna, Miriam? Do you remember hearing the noise in 2021? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yes. So what did you do, Carmen? Did you just put earplugs in your ears, or what did you do?
No, I just try to stay the less possible outside.
Yeah, so now you don't have to worry so much about running outside, do you? Yeah. So now, of course, Brazil. Now, keep in mind, cicadas are not just in the United States. Of course, Deborah, we have cicadas in lots of other countries around the world. So in Brazil, are cicadas often pretty loud like that?
Yes, I like it.
You like it?
Yes, because it's the song of the forest, and sometimes people call me and what is the song? And for me, it's usual. It's normal.
Okay.
They start very early, five in the morning, and start again in the afternoon until 7 or 8. Yeah.
Well, that's Now, two problems here, Deborah. Number one, we don't live in the forest. We live in near Cincinnati, and the other problem, of course, is and this is true again. When I was teaching, so I was in 2021. I'd been teaching online almost a year. Like, if some of you remember, that was kind of new for us. And I was in a different room of my house teaching class. It was so loud I could hear them outside. I mean, that's how bad it was. And so I kept telling my students, I hope you don't hear them through my headphones, through my microphone, because it was so loud you could hear it in the house. I mean, I was trying to teach. So anyway, it was definitely a very interesting experience. So, well, anyway, I don't want to scare everybody, but that is a preview, I think, of what we're going to see. Now, of course, speaking of comeback, I wanted to talk a little bit about this expression because we use this expression in a couple of different ways. So everybody, if you want to turn on your microphones just for a moment, let's practice these two expressions. So the one that everyone probably knows is the first one. So everyone, let's say the first one together. So guys, turn on those microphones. Let's say it together. To come back.
To come back.
Okay, let's say the second one now. To make a comeback.
To make
Okay, now we'll turn off the microphones there for a moment. Now, I think everybody probably knows come back is like return. If you're telling somebody come back, maybe they're leaving and you want them to return. So that's fine. But the second one, I thought, well, let's talk about this because yes, the cicadas, it seems like the cicadas are returning, right? They're coming back, but actually it's not the same cicadas, right? It's a different group of cicadas. So in a way, we think of the natural cycle. We think of nature as this kind of cycle, right? Things return in a way, but we can also talk about it when it comes to different things like fashion, for example, different types of trends, right? So the idea here is to make a comeback. We can use in a couple of different ways. So if you take a look here on the screen, to make a comeback, one meaning is to return to a state of fame, popularity, and or success after an absence. So sometimes we use this expression with, like a singer or a musician, someone who maybe has disappeared for a little while and then has returned to be successful again. So you might say this is making a comeback. You know, someone who's trying to maybe they had some problem in their lives, or maybe they just weren't doing very well in their profession. Eventually they stopped and then they decide to return. So we might call that a comeback, right? To try to come back and be successful again. We can also use it in sports. So for example, if someone is playing a sport and gets injured, you know, maybe they hurt themselves and then they try to come back and play again, maybe not in the same game, maybe next year, you know, which happens all the time. I don't know if any of you are sports fans, but you know, athletes get injured all the time and then they try to return. So we might say they're making a comeback. And then we can also use it, in speaking of sports, we can also use it, a team can make a comeback during a game. So maybe they're losing in the game and then they come back and win, or they come back and, you know, play very well. So that they often use the word to make a comeback there too. Now, we can also use the expression, as I mentioned before, we can use the expression with things like fashion. You know, fashion things make comebacks, right? So if you think about clothing, you know, maybe there are certain clothing styles that return, certain music, or, you know, certain popular things might make a comeback. So in this way, we can also use it in that way as well. Things that maybe disappeared or are older and then suddenly they return. So again, we think of things that have cycles, right? So again, we think about insects, for example, like the cicadas, but you can also think about fashion. You can think about other things, maybe from your childhood, that have become popular again. So they're making a comeback. So I thought what we would do is do a little short dialogue. So there's a little short dialogue here, and then I've actually got 2 questions in thinking about comebacks. So you can discuss those 2 questions with your partner as well. So this is kind of a typical situation I think many of you might recognize, especially now that we're adults, right? So the idea is things disappear and make a comeback. So it happens, right? That's the way it is. So when you get older, things that were popular before become popular again, right? Well, some of them do. All right, well, guys, we're going to go into the breakout room and do this little dialogue. And again, there are 2 questions for you to discuss. When you return, we'll take a look and see how we're doing. Okay. All right. All right, I think we're only waiting for one more person. There she is. All right. Hey, let's talk about the 2 questions. So I'm especially interested in question number 1 because I don't really pay attention that much to fashion or, you know, those kinds of things. But I am noticing that it seems like people are still maybe wearing the jeans that are ripped, you know, like the ripped knees or the ripped kind of old looking jeans. That seems to be one trend I've noticed. Those were kind of popular when I was in high school back in the 1980s. So maybe they've always been popular. I don't know. So that's just one example. I'm also noticing that in music, now I guess it depends on what you listen to, but I'm also noticing that a lot of the music that I'm hearing sounds a kind of like they're borrowing musical ideas from the 1980s. You know, again, my sort of generation. So I don't know. Those are 2 things I've noticed, but I don't really pay attention that much. So what about you guys? Have you noticed any things from your childhood or teenage years making a comeback? Anybody have any thoughts about the first one? Lubna?
Yes, for example, in my country, the traditional clothes, the old style, he become now the trend. So if you have an old one, you are lucky. So
Well, what's an example of something old? Are you talking about, like, when you say traditional, do you mean like from a particular religious like ceremony, or do you just mean the clothing
yes,
that?
it's like we have a special clothes that we wear in parties and
Okay,
marriage, like that.
really
Yeah, like
interesting.
that, if you hear
So
before.
why do you think that's making a comeback?
Because maybe the style is it doesn't change. It doesn't change too much, but all the time they change the style. So maybe that's why they come back to it.
Maybe, yeah, or maybe younger people are looking for a time when things still felt kind of real. You know, sometimes I think we look to the past because today we have too much digital. You know, nothing seems real. So I think I'm also noticing, like with music, like for example, I'm noticing people are starting to buy CDs again. Which is surprising because I thought CDs were kind of dead. So, of course, I always like CDs. But so, yeah, maybe people are looking for real things, like authentic, real things. So, yeah, maybe that might be a good idea. All right. Anybody else recognize anything? Like maybe even like movies. I notice, you know, sometimes movies, they kind of make the same movie from when you were a child. I'm noticing right now Disney. Maybe you've noticed this the last few years. Disney movies have tried to remake movies like Snow White. You know, these were movies that were popular a long time ago, but now I'm noticing they're making them into real people, you know, live action instead of cartoons, for example. Now, Lubna, that's another thing I'm noticing is people are buying again the Instamatic cameras that can print the photo at the moment. You like the Instamatics, but also I think a lot of there are apps you can download and print pictures from your phone. Yeah, so that's been kind of surprising. Okay. All right. Anybody else noticing any other trends making a comeback? I'm noticing a few people are buying the old cell phones, you know, like flip phones, for example, instead of the smartphones. I'm noticing it's not a big thing, but I'm noticing a few people are doing it. So, any others?
The jeans, Mr. John.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I was in middle school, I was using this kind of jeans called baggy jeans.
Yeah, baggy.
And now my teenager daughter loves to use this kind of jeans, and sometimes in the morning she's looking in my husband's closet, and I ask her, what are you looking for? And she said, maybe I can use my one of my dad jeans because I like bigger one. And I said, no, you can't, because she's very tiny. And
well, sometimes I still, I mean, when I used to teach high school, Carmen, those were very popular. So that was about 30 years ago. And so I noticed the kids, they would walk around with these big baggy clothes, and sometimes they'd use their hands to hold up their pants.
yes.
So are you saying those are popular again?
Yes.
Really? Oh my goodness. Well, here's what I think you should do, Carmen. I think you should buy her the biggest pair of jeans you can find, just so she can see how ridiculous it is. That's what you should do. Find a pair of jeans that are like 20 sizes too big, so she'll look like a big, you know, like a clown or something inside of these big pants.
Yeah.
Everything. Just buy everything big. Just really big hat, big shirt, everything. Of course, they probably think it's cool. I don't know. Got it?
I think nowadays, or recently, people or teenagers trying to mimic or copy the celebrities and the influencers, and
Sure.
and what they see in movies and something like that. But I don't like to some fashion to come back, like I can say beaded blouse.
Okay. Yeah.
It was very terrible fashion in the past. I don't like to.
Well,
to
even
come back.
now, it's funny you mentioned that, because the fashion trend, I don't know if it's popular at the moment, but I've noticed in the last few years, you know, like military camouflage clothing.
Yes.
Like my nephews, they would want to wear like camouflage T-shirts or, you know, shorts, or those were kind of, again, those had become kind of popular when I was in school, but I mean a long time ago. So I was surprised to see those, you know, come back, because I'm like, I didn't like them really that much when they were there the first time.
Yes,
So
people like to wear that. Even girls, no
yeah.
boys, even girls
No, that's true.
like
That's
to wear
true.
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, when I was young, it was only boys, but I think you're right. And you're right about the whole influencer, TikTok, Instagram. It's crazy now because now I see, and not on purpose. So I'll get like an ad will pop up in my feed, and it'll be some influencer, or trying to advertise some new clothing they just got in the package, and they'll show, they'll open the package and they'll show it. Yeah. So I mean, now it's like instant commercials for these things. So
But I
you're
like
right.
to see a lot of actors, Egyptian actors, to come back to see in the movie and on the screen. I like to see all the movies. It's a kind of
Yeah.
nostalgia.
Yeah. Well, that's something we could talk about for number 2, because I do agree with you. My wife and I have been watching, Netflix, and on Netflix, we notice, especially on Netflix, that some of the new shows are bringing back a lot of the older actors from, when we were kids, and they're old now, like they're in their 70s or 80s. But when we were kids, they were the popular, actors at the time, not just kids, teenagers, but actually adults. So it's been very interesting to see them appear in these TV shows and movies again. So for me, I think that's kind of number 2. I like to see older actors making comebacks to see, what's going on. So I kind of agree with you. I think that's been a really positive thing because, you go to the movies today, all the movies are all young people. They're
And
all young.
besides the song and the kind of music which the teenager like to hear now, it's terrible. It's
Yeah.
terrible.
Yeah. 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 So let's talk about number 2 real quickly, guys. What are some other things from the past? Now, they don't have to be. I'm speaking, of course, of my culture here in America, but of course, they could be things from your culture as well. So, what else do you think should make a comeback? I'll give another example. I think writing letters. Now, I say this because I'm terrible at writing letters, but my wife, she loves it, and she really thinks it's a very like, instead of just sending emails or Facebook messages for birthday, she really likes sending cards and letters. So I'm beginning to really understand that that's very special. Now you're taking time to write letters. You're taking your time to even though my handwriting is terrible. That's why I don't like writing letters. But now my wife has convinced me, so I've gone to some places and, gotten to show my book and, do some book signings. So I've been writing letters to thank people for these events. So I thought, okay, that'd be great if that made a comeback. I'd like to see more people write letters and send cards. Those are still very nice things. Got it?
Yes, I'd like to share with you that I like to record my voice on the cassette tape when I was young. So I really need to some kind of cassette tape and something like that to make a comeback. But I can use a voice message or something
Well,
like that phone. But it was very fun for me to record it via cassette.
well, yeah, so let me tell you right now, Gata, I do not miss cassettes. So I love the voice recorder on the phone. To me, it's much better than cassettes. But I do agree with you. I like the older technologies. So, for example, here in my office, my little office where I'm teaching you guys, I've got a record player, I've got CD player. It's kind of like my little time capsule, going back in time. I've got CDs and music records. I still love those things. So I agree. It's nice to have something you can touch, something you can feel, but I do not miss cassettes. So Gata, you can keep all the cassettes, okay?
I'd like also to mention some funny stories that I was recording some memories about one day I was fighting with my father, and I was very angry, so I forgot to take it from the car, and my dad accidentally listened to it. It was a little problem with him.
Well, and even then, cassettes for a kid, cassettes were still kind of expensive, so you always had to reuse the same cassette. And so if you accidentally recorded over the cassette, then you lost what you recorded the first time. Yeah. So I don't know.
I was able also to fix it when it.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
God, I'm going to tell you right now, I do not miss cassettes. And the fact that cassettes are becoming popular, or at least a little bit popular, that's crazy to me. I do not miss them at all. Flavia, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I wish you'd make a comeback the way how people used to enjoy life before cell phones.
Yeah.
Yeah, for example, I just remember that people used to go to a restaurant and make like a eye contact while they were eating, but
Yeah.
now it's different.
I
I
hate
just realized that people are using their cell phones.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are waiting for the food and they just enjoy that time for scroll the cell phone.
Yeah, I think people today cannot stand to have even a second of boredom. I think they need every moment filled with something. So even if it's driving, stopping at the light and looking at your phone. I mean, I agree with you, Flavia. I honestly, going to restaurants today is kind of depressing. And part of it too, Flavia, is the fact that you go to some restaurants and it's just, the TVs and the music. And I wish we could go back in time and at least have moments or restaurants when we didn't have all of this noise.
Yeah, even the restaurants haven't been offering so many screen time for everyone.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Well, and honestly, here's the thing. Since the pandemic, like the beginning of the pandemic till now, so for the last 5 years, we eat at home a lot more than we used to eat out. And I don't really miss it that much. And once in a while, it's nice to go to a restaurant, sure. But I don't miss it because, boy, I really hate the experience. It really is. And Lubna, you mentioned life without social media. I completely agree too. This past weekend, I tried to stay off social media almost the whole time. It's impossible, of course, but I try not to look at my phone too much. I worked outside, had to cut some trees, just taking a walk, listening to music, just whatever I could to get away from social media. So you think so, Deborah? Well, Deborah, I've had this beard for a long time. So do you think, so what does this mean, Deborah? Does this mean I'm cool now? I'm finally.
I think in the past, men use it a lot. Yes, big mustache. And now come back and style like a couple years ago, I think maybe.
Well, not only just mustaches, but full beards too.
Yeah.
Now see, mine probably needs a little, but like the really big ones, the really full beards.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you're in the 1800s or something. Now, I can tell you right now, Deborah, my wife does not want that to make a comeback. Okay, so she does not. She hates it. So interesting. Well, everyone is sharing some very interesting things. I do agree, though. I really miss life before social media and computer, internet. I think, unfortunately, around 2008, 2009, that's when I think things really started to turn in a bad direction. That's kind of my feeling. The internet in the beginning had a lot of hope and promise and good things about it. But then for some reason, right around 2008, 2009, when Facebook started becoming more popular, I don't know. It just felt like the world started turning into a bad place. So, of course, there's some good things about social media, but I agree with you. It's very sad now to think people cannot spend 2 seconds without looking at their phones. So, well, anyway, we could talk about this all day. Right now, we'll just sound like a bunch of old people complaining. So maybe we'll do that one day. We'll just call it old person complaining class, and we can just complain about everything. Right? Okay, well, that's what happens when you get older. Well, anyway, guys, our two expressions today: to come back and to make a comeback. So to make a comeback is kind of to make things return again. Fashion, for example, music. But it could be for many different things. People can make a comeback, especially we mentioned a few minutes ago, older actors, making a comeback and becoming popular again. But you can use it in many different ways as well. So this serves as, I think, a great kind of entry, into our discussion, especially talking about separable and inseparable phrasal verbs. So that's what I'd like to do now, is let's talk a little bit more about the grammar of these ideas this morning, and then we're going to do some exercises. Okay, so that's kind of our goal here, because honestly, talking about it is one thing, but practicing it, that's the thing we need to do. So let's go back for a moment and take a look at the presentation. So I kind of reviewed this a little bit last week. Let's take a look at it again. Okay, so once again, we discussed that phrasal verbs are very common ideas in English. So compared to other languages, phrasal verbs are common because English started as what we call a Germanic language. Germanic languages often use 2 and 3 words to express something that maybe in other languages like French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, where you may only use 1 word to express an idea. So again, as we learned last week, expressions like find out, which is very similar to learn or look or search for something. In English, we might use 2 words to say the idea. Now, of course, these other words do exist in English. So, for example, the word search, right? When we look for something or we find out something, we search for information. Of course, this word exists in English, but what you will notice is the word search is not so common for people when they speak English. It's much more common for people to say something like, I need to find out something, right? I need to look for something, or I need to, search for something. In this case, searching is not something we use as commonly, right? To figure out means like to understand and to solve. So if I figure out something, that would be more like to solve something. Find out means more like to look for it. I'm looking for an answer for something. So to figure out is more like I solved it. Yeah. But again, in our discussion, as we looked at last time, these particular expressions like get along with, or put off, or look for, these are all very common in English. But one of the things we have to understand is that some of these particular expressions can be separated. So, for example, in the example we looked at last time, put off. When we put off a decision, right, we postpone, we delay the decision. But we can also separate put and off, and we can put the decision in the middle. I put the decision off. Now, the reason, of course, that's not so familiar to a lot of students is because we are doing something that's not so common in other languages. We're actually taking 2 words that have one idea, but we're actually separating the words. So that seems very strange, doesn't it? It seems more common that these ideas are working together. Why would you separate it? Well, that's English. So part of the problem here is to think about the verb put. This is what I wanted to talk a little bit more about this morning. How do we know if the particular expression is going to be separable or not? Well, part of the idea depends on the verb in the expression. So I'll share that with you here in just a moment. But if you look at the other examples here at the bottom of the screen, point your achievements out, right? To indicate, to point your achievements out, or to point out your achievements. So both of these expressions, of course, say the same thing. Now, the third idea, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in our next class, is what happens when we separate the expression and we replace it with a pronoun. So, for example, if in the instructions it says, when the object of a separable phrasal verb is a noun, it can come before or after. But if the object is a pronoun, now a pronoun are those words that replace nouns. So, for example, pronouns would be words such as it or me. Now, again, we're talking about object pronouns. You, him, her, them, right? And then us. These particular pronouns are the object pronouns that we would use. But of course, it depends on what the sentence is trying to say. So in our example, where it says your achievements, well, notice achievements has an S at the end. So we would replace the word achievements with the word them, point them out. But that doesn't really make sense unless we know what the noun is that it's replacing. So that's why we're going to talk a little bit more about that in our next class. You'll see some examples today, but we'll talk a little bit more about it and practice a little bit more. But the goal is to understand which verbs are separable and which ones are not. That's what we're going to talk a little bit more about today. So as we said before, many can be separated. Those are called separable verbs. Others cannot. And part of it will depend on the meaning of the expression. So that's the first thing we'll think about here this morning. So again, as we mentioned, for example, don't give up. Well, for example, you will notice that there's no object that's directly stated because it's referring to ourselves. It's talking to you. Don't you give up, right? You are the object. So in this case, this is kind of more of a what we call a reflexive action. It's coming back to the person. Don't quit, right? Don't give up. You're telling them to you. Now, of course, if I want to talk about my job, in this case, then you could use the job as an object, right? Don't give up your job or don't quit your job. Now, the reason I'm talking about this here this morning is because this will give you an idea which verbs can be separated and which ones cannot. Because sometimes the verb, for example, the verb give, sometimes that particular word can use an object, right? For example, if I give this pencil, let's think about it for a moment. I give something, I give this pencil to you, right? So for example, if I'm using the expression, even if it's a phrasal verb, give up, if I'm talking about giving up something, right? For example, my pencil, then that would be a situation where I could separate the expression because it could require an object. So if I say, for example, don't give up the pencil, you might say, what? Well, give up also means like to give it up, to give it up to somebody else. Like maybe somebody says, give me your pencil, right? Maybe they're threatening you and say, I'm going to take your pencil. I'm going to punch you if you don't give me your pencil. So if I give up my pencil, it means I kind of surrender my pencil. I give it to someone else because they want to hurt me. Well, in that case, the expression needs an object. Give up what? What am I giving up? Well, I'm giving up my pencil. Or in my example here about your job, don't quit your job. If I have a job and I want to quit, they might say, don't give up your job. Don't quit your job. So part of the problem here is asking whether the expression is talking about something else, or is it coming back to the person who is speaking? Is it a reflexive action that's only affecting me as the speaker, not something or somebody else? Now, I'm going to pull up the next screen and we're going to talk about it, thinking about that grammar idea. So on the next screen, let's take a look. So in these examples, let's take a look at them. In each of these examples, the question is, are we using them with a particular object? Well, if you look very carefully, so if you see here, maybe you noticed it on the document that I shared with you, these letters here are telling us that we're using them in this particular way. Do something over, like do your homework over, right? So in this case, that STH is referring to something. If you look at the bottom of the screen and the bottom of the document I sent to you, that's what it means. If you see the letters SB, that's referring to somebody. So in many of these cases, you can see that some of these use people and some of these use things. So take a look at them. Figure something out, which means to understand something. So I want to make it clear that this part's kind of missing from the definition, but all of the definitions are referring to something else. To figure something out means to understand something. Like, for example, a math. Maybe you're in a math class and you have a math problem. You figure the problem out. I try to understand the problem. Now, the reason I want to talk about this is because what we're talking about is how we are using the verb. So class, I'm going to teach you 2 new words. Maybe you know these words already. These are grammar terms. And then I'm going to show you how you can find this out when you're searching for information online. So for example, when we're looking at separable phrasal verbs, it's because the expression is being used as we would call in a transitive way. So we would call this a transitive verb. Everyone, turn on your microphones for a moment. Let's say that together. Okay, so let's say it. Transitive verb.
Transitive verb.
So a transitive verb means it needs an object. So that means that when I'm using the phrasal verb, it doesn't necessarily matter what the second word is. The word over or off or out, that gives more meaning to the expression, but it's really how we're using the verb. If we're using the verb in a transitive way, in other words, if someone else is receiving the action, then in this case, this is a transitive use of the word. Now, for example, if you're not sure, when you look online, so let's say you're using a learner's dictionary or some kind of dictionary here. Okay, so I'm going to pull up an example here. Okay. So for example, I'm going to pull up here on the screen. So this is the word figure. Okay, so I went ahead and put in the word figure. Now at the top of the screen, you will see here that you can choose to use figure in a different, you can choose to use it in a couple of different ways. For example, if I want to use it as a noun, right, a figure like a shape, or if I want to use it as a verb. Now class, I'm going to click on the verb for just a moment. It'll take you to that point. Now, I want you to notice here, because this is a learner's dictionary, they're not going to use the word transitive. I want you to look very carefully what they do say. Take a look at it. So do you notice what it says here? Plus object. Plus an object. So that means one of the meanings of the word figure is to figure something, to expect or think. So let me pull up an example. So notice here that says, I figured he would get tired. I expected he would do something. Okay, so that would be using it with an object. Now, as I scroll down, let's see if we can find figure out. So there's figure in, figure into, figure on. Oh, you didn't know there were so many, did you? Okay, take a look. To figure out. Do you see that? Okay, now class, what do you notice underneath? To figure out
Something.
or to figure something out. So the learner's dictionary, so this is a dictionary I've used before in class, it's helping you by telling you directly, can I use an object with it or not? Well, in this case, I can. That's pretty cool. That's very helpful. Of course, not every dictionary will tell me in that way. Different dictionaries will say it in different ways. For example, let me show you this one here. Okay, so I'm going to pull up here. Okay. So this is what we call the Longman Dictionary online. This is another dictionary that I often recommend for students to use because it's designed for English students. So I'm going to scroll down for just a moment and pull up the verb. So if you notice, it says verb, right? It says figure, right? See it right there? Verb, okay. Now, the first meaning says intransitive. I'll talk about that in just a moment. But if you look at the second meaning, it says transitive. So remember, transitive means, oops, sorry guys, got a commercial there. Transitive means that it can use an object. So in this case, I figured that, right? I figured something. I figured that he was drunk. It's not a great example, right? You could also use it in math, like to figure your expenses, like to calculate. So in this case, now you see this dictionary uses the formal transitive word. It tells you whether you need an object or not. So if it's transitive, that means I need an object. Now, if you look down here, you see what it says here? To figure something or somebody out. Well, that's helpful. It tells me that it can use an object. And if I click on it, take a look. So here it's telling me directly whether I can use an object or not. So in this case, it's telling me that I can use this word as a transitive idea. It can use an object. Okay, so that's at least giving you some help in thinking about when I look online whether this word can use an object or not. So coming back to this list, right? The idea here is that we're looking at words that use objects. Now, if you notice though from the dictionary, here's a problem. Some of these words can be used in a transitive way. Some of them use objects, but not all of them. Sometimes they could be used without objects. Sometimes the same words that can be used in one way with an object are other times maybe not using an object. That's where it gets really confusing. Let's take a look. Look at the next list. So for example, if you notice here, take a look at the word count. Do you see the word count? Now the word count is a transitive verb, right? But not in this case. If I count, I have to count on. So if I say, for example, you can count on me, well, you're not counting me, right? You're not counting 1 me, 2 me, 3 me's. You're using it in a different way. So if I go back for a moment to the dictionary, let's find it here in the dictionary. And I'm going to find count on. You will notice that in this case, if I count on, I can only use it after the expression. I can't separate them. I can count on somebody, but I can't count somebody on because I'm not directly counting the person. I'm using it in a different way. So many times the answer is the particular expression may not use an object, or at least a direct object. So when I say count on, coming back to my Burlington list, well, I can count on somebody, but I can't count somebody on, because the word count, if I use it as a direct expression, count means I count something. I count 1 pencil, 2 pencils, right? I'm counting pencils. So one of the problems is sometimes the verb itself is not being used as a transitive verb. Instead, the expression is being used in a different way. So part of the problem here is that some of these can't be separated because I'm not using the verb as the transitive action. I can't separate them because I'm not using the verb directly to affect the person. Like, for example, to get into a school. Well, I don't get a school into what? When I get into, it says be accepted to a school, but I can't separate them because I'm not using the word get. Like, for example, if I get something in the mail, right? Do we like getting things in the mail? Sometimes we order stuff just so we can get stuff in the mail, right? Or get off. Well, we get off a plane, but we don't get a plane. If I said I get a plane, that's a totally different meaning, right? I get the plane. It's not mine. So many times these expressions might use an object, but the verb is not using the object. It's the expression. Then, of course, sometimes, like give up, sometimes the object is me. In this case, I would reflect back to me. I give up. I quit, right? So I stop working. So again, many times these particular verbs here, these inseparable phrasal verbs, might use an object, but I can't separate them because the verb itself is not using the object. It's the expression. And sometimes the verbs, like slow down, don't use an object at all. They're talking about the person who's doing the action. I'm slowing down. I need to slow down. Talking to myself. I'm not slowing somebody else. I'm doing it to myself. So part of that helps explain the grammar, but sometimes that doesn't help. Sometimes we just have to know the expression, right? So last class, I asked the group here, were most of these words familiar to you? Maybe they were. And sometimes I said, if you're trying to make an expression using these words, well, sometimes you just have to listen to it and say, does that sound okay? Can I separate them or not? Well, again, my advice to you is, going back to our first list, it's the verb that often tells us if I can separate it or not. Okay, that's the idea. But some of these verbs have different meanings. So that's where it can get a little confusing. So part of it is you just learn the expressions, but also thinking about, am I talking about separating an action, or if I try to separate them, does it change the meaning of the expression? Yeah, sometimes it does. Okay, now that explains the grammar, but that doesn't help us so much in using them. So let's try a couple of examples, and then we're going to have you guys try a couple of examples with your small groups. So let's try this first one. Let's take a look. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this text. It says, read the text and answer the questions below. Now, what I'd like to do is this. So over here on the left side, right side, we have things we're looking for. So what I'd like to do first is, let's just identify phrasal verbs. Okay, let's look through and just identify any phrasal verbs we can find. Okay, that's all I want to do first. So let's take a look. Now, what I'd like to do is, I'm going to ask some people to read for us. So maybe the first part here, Flavia, if you'd like to read maybe this first part, you can stop at the word polite.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. What should you do if the police stop your car? If you drive above the speed limit, a police officer may pull you over. What happened in this situation? The officer will have a conversation with you about what would you did wrong. They will probably point out the dangers of speeding and tell you to slow down in the future. Always apologize and be polite.
Okay, thank you, Flavia. Now, Flavia, you and anybody else in the class, do you see any phrasal verbs here in this first part of the reading?
Yes, the first one that I saw, it's pull you over.
Okay. Okay, let me highlight it, then I'll close the little box here and move it over. Okay, so pull over. Okay. Okay, what other ones do we see?
Point out the dangers. Yeah.
Okay, point out.
Slow down.
Maybe slow down. Okay. Okay. All right, so that sounds like a good start so far. All right, I'm going to continue. Carmen, would you like to read the last part for us?
Yes. The officer will then go back to his car to check your driver's license and fill out a traffic ticket. Wait patiently until the officer comes back and gives you your ticket. You will also have to pay a fine. You can do this online or by mail, but don't put it off.
Thank you, Carmen. Okay, now again, anybody can participate. Do you see any other phrasal verbs in this part?
Fill out.
Go back.
Okay, so fill out, go back.
Comes back.
Put it off.
Put it off. Good. Okay. All right. Looks like we've identified quite a few so far. All right. Now, in thinking about what the text, what the activity is, the next one is having us thinking about which ones might use objects. So let's go back for just a moment. I'm just going to quickly pull back the requirements here, and then I'm going to bring the text back. So it says, find two phrasal verbs and their pronoun objects. The pronoun objects. Okay, so we're looking for two that have a pronoun object. Okay, so Flavia?
Okay, in the first line, you have pull over.
Okay, so in this case, you would be the object?
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
Okay. All right, and then
Let's see.
where would the second one be?
At the last line, I see put it off.
Okay, so it.
It's the pronoun.
Okay, so we have you and it. That's right. We can't forget you is a pronoun, right? So it is replacing the person's name. All right, so there are two that have pronouns. Okay, let's see if we can find two that use objects. Which ones actually use objects? So we've identified those two. Okay. So to do something.
Slow down in the future?
No.
Okay.
Now, one reason you can tell that's not an object is because it begins with the word in.
Okay.
Yeah, generally that would be what's called a prepositional phrase. So usually those are times or locations, but not necessarily objects.
Fill out a traffic ticket.
Yeah, so to fill out something. Mm-hmm. Okay. There's one more.
Point out.
Point out. So what's the dangers? There you go. All right, very good. Yeah, the dangers. In fact, we can include of speeding since it's describing the word dangers. Okay, now that leaves us with two more. So if you notice, comes back and slow down. Now, these are examples where we're not using a direct object. If you'll notice, these are situations that we might consider reflexive. So, for example, if we said the officer comes back, so who are we talking about when we say the officer comes back? So comes back is referring to
Officer.
Yeah.
Officer.
Yeah. So in this case, this would be not separable, right? This would be kind of an intransitive use. Okay. And then slow down. So who's the slow down?
The person who is Who's going to have the ticket?
Well, Carmen, look very carefully. Apparently, that's you.
Yeah.
So congratulations, Carmen. You've gotten caught for speeding. There you go. That's all right, Carmen. It happened. It happened to me last year. Okay. Don't tell anybody. Yeah, it wasn't cheap either. It happens, right? Okay. Yeah. Now, of course, we've got to slow down. We also can say go back. Right? The officer will go back. There's another one. So in this case, that's kind of like comes back, right? Goes back. So all of these are situations where they're referring back to the subject. Now, that's not always the case, but in these cases, these are reflexive. And in this case, these are what we would call intransitive uses. There's no other object. They're referring back to the person who's doing the action. So come back, go back, slow down. These are intransitive uses. Now, it's okay. We don't have to remember transitive and intransitive, but that's part of the challenge of why. Right, I'll see if I can write here. I don't know if I can write it on the screen. I don't think I can write it. There we go. Intransitive. Now, again, I told you last week, most English speakers don't think about those things, right? We're not thinking grammatically about transitive and intransitive uses. But in this case, that gives you sort of the explanation, because the truth is the actions are happening to the person who's doing the action, not to somebody else or to something else. So in this case, that's what we're kind of looking at here. Okay. All right. Good job. We found those examples here in the text. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen. Okay. Now, we have just enough time, I think, maybe to do at least one activity as a small group. Let's take a look at the instructions. So in the instructions, at the top of the screen, you've got some choices here. Now, notice they've already put them into their correct verb form. So the idea is when you add them to the sentence, you're going to decide if we need to use a pronoun where necessary. Now, remember, pronouns replace the proper nouns that we see earlier in the sentence. So let's do number one kind of as our example. So number one says, Kanesha was late for her job interview because she, the train at the wrong station. Now remember, in the instructions, they say add pronouns where necessary. They may not be necessary. It just depends on the example. So class, take a look at number one and look at the expressions at the top of the screen. Took off, broke into, dropped off, count on, got off, fixed up, did over. Which one do you think might fit?
Got off.
Got off.
Got off. Let's see. Was late for because she got off the train at the wrong station. Okay, well, that seems logical. Let's check the answer and see if that's correct. Okay, very good. Now, I heard someone say took off, and that's actually not a bad guess, but here's the problem. We don't normally use takeoff with trains. Isn't that strange? We use it with airplanes, right? That makes sense, right? Airplanes take off. But we don't normally use it with trains. I don't know why. What do you think we might say with trains?
I guess it's the same. I should use got off.
Well, we can get off a train. My question is, we get on a train, right? Yeah, we get on a train, but trains don't take off, do they? So what do we do? What can we say about trains, by the way?
Getting?
No, the train, not you, the train. Because takeoff is what a plane does. So what do we say for trains? Trains don't take off. What do they do?
Get off.
You guys are trying to think too much like phrasal verbs. I don't think there is one. I think we just say trains leave. I think that's it. Trains just leave the station, don't they? I mean, planes, we could say planes leave too, but usually we say take off with planes. So takeoff doesn't even make sense because we're talking about the person, right? Not the train. So in this case, I think get off is the only answer. But take off is something a plane does, not a person. Yeah. Okay, well, let's see how you guys do by finishing the exercise. So we're going to go back into the breakout room, and let's see if you can finish the activity. Now remember, sometimes you might need a pronoun, sometimes you don't. So just remember, it's not necessary for every answer, okay? Well, let's go back to the breakout room. I will join you with the link to the activity, and we'll take about 6 minutes or so. I don't think it'll take you that long to finish the exercise. All right, guys, so get ready. Here we go. I think just about everybody has returned. Now, our time is short, so I'm going to read the sentence, and then if anybody wants to chime in with the answer, go right ahead. So we already did number 1. Let's do number 2. Gil's new uniform was too small. He
Took off.
Okay, now you have the right word, but I think we're missing one small word. He took
His off. His
Oh,
clothes.
You're getting closer. I
His
think in this case,
uniform, I mean, yeah.
yeah, so I think they're looking for the word it. He took it off and asked his manager for a bigger one. Yeah, so his uniform, it. All right, let's try number 3. Someone
Broke into.
broke into Jackson's house while he was away on a business trip. Now, this one does not use a pronoun, right? Number 4, when Anna's children were little, she
Dropped them off.
Yes, we got drop off, probably dropped them off. Yeah, the kids, right? All right, number 5, Anton used to have a car business. He bought old cars.
Fix it up.
Fix
Okay.
them up.
Okay, so we got fixed, and then we have up.
Fix it.
Well, you're close, Ezra. How many cars did he fix up? Just one or more?
More.
I think more. So not it. He fixed
Them.
them. There we go. So you had the right idea. We got there. All right. Fixed them up and sold them for a profit. I think today you probably can make lots of money selling used cars, right? All right. Number 6, Oleg failed one course in his first semester of college. He
Did
it over.
the following year. So again, it's hard sometimes to remember that the pronoun, right? He did it, the course. Okay. So again, you're guessing the right expression, just that little word there we're going to practice with. All right. Number 7, Cal is very responsible. You can always
count on him.
count on him to get the job done. Now, we cannot say count him on, right? We can't do that because we're not counting him, right? We're not saying 1 him, 2 him, 3 hymns. We're counting on him. So in this case, him would be the replacement. Okay, so guys, we did a great job identifying the expression. It just takes time to practice adding those pronouns. And I think part of it is, it's not something that's natural for us because as we said before in English, it's very common, but probably not so common in other languages. So this is kind of our first entry, right? Our first step practicing these expressions. Okay, well, guys, our time is up for today. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. I'll send some activities for you to practice. So, but anyway, guys, have a great rest of your day. We'll see you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, Mr. John,
Yes, ma'am.
I can't log into Berlinks in English. I forget the password. Could you send it to me one more time?
Yeah,
please?
let's see while we're here. Since we're thinking about it, let's take a look here.
I forget the password.
Well, let's make sure that it hasn't been turned off. So sometimes here we go.